Welcome to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight, we journey back through the mists of time to explore one of humanity's most enduring mysteries, a civilization so advanced, so magnificent, that its memory has haunted our collective imagination for over 2,000 years. This is the story of Atlantis, the world that fell in a single day. Close your eyes now and let yourself drift. As you relax into this moment, we'll travel together to a time before recorded history, to a place that may have existed at the very edge of memory and myth. Whether Atlantis was real or merely a philosophical allegory, its story has captivated minds across millennia, and tonight it will guide you gently into sleep. Breathe slowly, deeply, and let us begin. Part 1. The First Telling. Our story begins not in Atlantis itself, but in ancient Athens, around 360 BCE. The great philosopher Plato sits in the academy he founded, surrounded by students eager to learn about justice, governance, and the ideal state. In two of his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, Plato introduces the world to Atlantis. But he doesn't present it as fiction. He frames it as history, passed down through generations, told to the Athenian statesman Solon by Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. According to these priests, the story of Atlantis dated back 9,000 years before Solon's time, making it ancient even to the ancients. Imagine the scene. The temple at Sais, with its massive columns casting long shadows in the afternoon sun, the air thick with incense. The elderly priest, keeper of sacred records, looking at Solon with a mixture of pity and amusement. "You Greeks are like children," he says. "You have no ancient learning, no knowledge hoary with age." The priest explains that catastrophes have repeatedly destroyed human civilizations. Floods, fires, cosmic disasters. Each time only fragments of knowledge survive, carried forward by those who escaped to the mountains or were otherwise spared. The Greeks, living in a land prone to such disasters, have forgotten their own greatest achievements. But Egypt, protected by the Nile and its unique geography, has preserved records of events that other nations have forgotten. And among these records is the story of Atlantis and its war with ancient Athens. Let yourself sink deeper now as we picture this lost world. Your breathing is slow and steady. Your body grows heavier, more relaxed. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Just listen and drift. Part 2. The Island Beyond the Pillars. According to Plato's account, Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. In the Atlantic Ocean there existed an island larger than Libya and Asia combined. This was Atlantis, and from it travellers could reach other islands, and from those islands, the opposite continent that surrounded the true ocean. Picture this vast island rising from the sea. At its heart, a great plain, surrounded by mountains that sheltered it from the north winds. The plain itself measured 3,000 stadia by 2,000 stadia, roughly 340 miles by 230 miles. A massive expanse of fertile land, blessed with a climate that allowed 2 harvests each year. But the true wonder lay at the centre of the plain, where a low mountain rose near the coast. This was where it all began, where the god Poseidon fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito. Cleito's parents had died, leaving her alone on this mountain. When Poseidon saw her, he was captivated. To protect her and claim her as his own, he reshaped the land itself. He carved the mountain into a series of concentric rings, alternating between land and water. 2 rings of land, 3 rings of water, each perfectly circular, each separated from the others by channels that made the central island inaccessible by ship. This was the beginning of Atlantis, not built by human hands but shaped by divine will. Your eyelids are heavy now, so heavy. The images form in your mind like dreams already beginning. Let them come. Let them flow. Poseidon and Cleito had 5 pairs of twin sons. The firstborn of the eldest twins was named Atlas, and to him Poseidon gave dominion over the central island and the surrounding territories. Atlas became the first king of Atlantis, and from him the island and the ocean took their names. The other 9 sons received territories of their own, some on the island of Atlantis, others on nearby lands. They became kings and princes, rulers of their own domains, but all acknowledged Atlas as the High King. And so began a dynasty that would last for generations beyond counting. Part 3. Building Paradise. The descendants of Atlas and his brothers transformed their divine inheritance into a civilization of unparalleled magnificence. Over centuries and millennia, they built upon Poseidon's foundation, creating wonders that would echo through history. The central island, Poseidon's original sanctuary, remained the heart of the city. But the Atlanteans were master engineers. They bridged the rings of water, creating passages for ships. They dug a great canal from the sea to the outermost ring of water, 50 stadia in length, wide enough and deep enough for the largest vessels to enter. Each ring of water became a harbour, filled with triremes and merchant ships from across the known world. But these weren't simple bridges and basic canals. The Atlanteans covered the bridges with roofs, creating tunnels beneath which ships could pass, and they built towers and gates at every passage. The rings of land themselves rose high above the water, fortified with walls that gleamed in the sunlight. Let me describe these walls, and as I do, feel yourself sinking deeper into rest. Your muscles release their tension, your mind quiets. You are safe, floating on the edge of sleep. The outermost wall was covered in brass, a metal the Atlanteans extracted from the earth in many parts of their island. The brass caught the light of dawn and glowed like fire. The second wall on the inner ring of land was coated in tin, reflecting the sky like a mirror, and the innermost wall, surrounding the central island itself, was covered in orichalcum. Orichalcum, a metal we can only imagine now. Plato describes it as second in value only to gold, a reddish metal that flashed like fire. The ancient name suggests it was a kind of copper, perhaps a natural alloy found nowhere else. In the ancient world, after Atlantis fell, orichalcum became legendary, a lost treasure sought by those who believed the stories were true. This wall of orichalcum surrounded the Acropolis, the sacred centre of the city. Here stood the palaces of the kings and the temples of the gods. The most magnificent of these was the temple of Poseidon himself. Imagine approaching this temple. You cross the innermost bridge, passing through gates of bronze. Guards in ceremonial armour, their faces hidden behind helmets worked with scenes of sea creatures and waves. The air smells of salt and incense. You hear the distant sound of fountains and the calls of seabirds. The temple rises before you, massive beyond comprehension. A stadium in length, 3 plethora wide and proportionally tall. The exterior walls are covered entirely in silver, except for the statues that stand at every corner worked in gold. The roof appears to be made of ivory, inlaid with gold, silver and orichalcum. You pass through bronze doors twice as tall as any man. Inside, the ceiling rises into shadow, supported by columns of silver and orichalcum. And there, in the centre of the temple, stands the statue of Poseidon. The god stands in a chariot driving 6 winged horses. The statue is so tall that the god's head nearly touches the ceiling. The entire sculpture is fashioned from gold. Around the base, 100 nereids ride upon dolphins, their faces serene, their hands reaching toward the god. Poseidon's own face looks out over his city, his expression both stern and benevolent, a god who protects his children but demands their reverence. Outside the temple, in the sacred precinct, golden statues stand in ordered rows. The first kings of Atlantis with their wives, heroes and benefactors, their deeds recorded on bronze plaques. Trees shade walking paths, and springs flow with water both hot and cold, gifts from the earth itself. The Atlanteans had discovered, you see, that the island possessed both hot and cold springs in abundance. They channeled these waters throughout the city, creating baths and fountains, places of luxury and healing. They built separate bathing facilities for kings, for private citizens, for women, and for horses and cattle. Each was supplied with water appropriate to its purpose, and the excess water flowed through channels to irrigate gardens and to provide fresh water for the sacred groves. Breathe deeply now. Feel the warmth of those baths, the comfort of that ancient water heated by the earth itself. Your body is warm and heavy. Sleep approaches like a gentle tide. Part 4. The Great Plain. Beyond the city, beyond the rings of water and land, stretched the Great Plain of Atlantis. This was the agricultural heartland, the source of the island's wealth and power. The plain had been shaped by the early kings, levelled and drained over countless generations. A massive canal surrounded the entire plain, 100 feet deep and a stadium in width. running for 10,000 stadia around the circumference. This great canal collected water from the mountain streams and carried it around the plain, with smaller channels branching off to irrigate the fields and then flowing back to the city and out to the sea. The plain was divided into 60,000 lots, each approximately square, each assigned to a landowner who was responsible for providing one military unit in time of war. From the highlands and the rest of the island came additional forces, all organised according to ancient law and tradition. Picture this plain at harvest time, fields of grain stretching to the horizon, golden in the sun. Orchards heavy with fruit, varieties that have been lost to time. Gardens where vegetables grow in ordered rows, tended by people who understood the rhythms of the earth. The air smells of cut grain and ripe fruit. Oxen pull carts along well-maintained roads. In the distance the mountains rise, their peaks sometimes visible, sometimes hidden in clouds. The Atlanteans had created a perfect agricultural system, one that fed not only their own population, but allowed them to trade extensively with other lands. 2 harvests a year meant abundance. The island's natural resources meant they lacked for nothing. From the earth they extracted metals, common and precious both. Gold, silver, copper, tin, and the mysterious orichalcum flowed from Atlantean mines. Timber came from the mountain forests, where trees grew tall and straight. The island produced food in such abundance that much was preserved or traded away. But Atlantis was more than just an agricultural paradise. It was the centre of a vast trading network. Ships arrived daily from across the known world. Merchants came to trade for Atlantean metals, for the island's famous crafts, for goods that could only be found in this blessed place. And in return, the Atlanteans received luxuries and necessities from every land. Exotic spices, fine cloths, precious stones, rare woods. Anything that existed in the ancient world could be found in the markets of Atlantis. The harbours were always full. 3 harbours in the rings of water, constantly busy with loading and unloading. The sounds of sailors calling to each other, ropes creaking, cargo thumping onto docks, merchants haggling in a dozen languages, the smell of pitch and salt water and distant lands. At night the harbours glowed with torchlight. Work continued through the darkness, such was the volume of trade. Looking down from the hills above the city, you would see the rings of water outlined in fire like a divine symbol drawn in light against the darkness. Let that image carry you deeper now. Lights on water, reflected and doubled. Your breathing is slow and even. Your body has found perfect comfort. You are drifting gently towards sleep. Part 5. The military might Atlantis was not only wealthy and beautiful, it was powerful. The military organisation of the island was extensive and sophisticated, reflecting both the island's resources and its imperial ambitions. Each of the 60,000 lots on the Great Plain was required to provide soldiers for the army. Specifically, each lot supplied 1 chariot with 2 horses and 2 riders, 1 cavalry horse with its rider, 2 hoplites or heavy infantry, 2 archers, 2 slingers, 3 stone shooters, 3 javelin men, and 4 sailors to help crew the 1,200 ships of the Atlantean navy. Imagine the army of Atlantis assembled for war. Thousands of chariots, their bronze fittings gleaming, horses stamping and tossing their heads, cavalry in ordered ranks, lances raised, the heavy infantry in their armour, shields locked together in the phalanx formation that made Greek armies nearly invincible, archers with their powerful bows, slingers with bags of lead shot, light infantry with javelins and stones, and behind them all, in the harbours, 1,200 ships, triremes mostly, galleys with 3 banks of oars, their rams shaped like the heads of sea monsters, their sails furled and ready. Each ship carried sailors and marines, men trained to fight both at sea and in landing operations. This was the military might that allowed Atlantis to build an empire. The island kingdom didn't remain isolated in the Atlantic. It reached out, conquering and subjugating, building a realm that stretched across the ocean and into the Mediterranean world. According to Plato's account, Atlantis controlled the islands of the Atlantic and parts of the opposite continent. Its ships ruled the waves, its armies were unmatched. And in time, the ambitions of the Atlantean kings turned toward the ancient world of the Mediterranean. They conquered Libya as far as Egypt. They conquered Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, which we know as Etruria in ancient Italy. The empire grew, and with it the pride and ambition of its rulers. But there was one power that stood against them, one city that refused to bow, that gathered allies and stood firm against the Atlantean invasion. That city was Athens. Sleep is very close now. You can feel it at the edges of your consciousness. Let the story carry you. Let the images blur and soften. Ancient armies clash in your mind like something from a dream, distant and unreal. Part 6. The Ancient Glory of Athens. Plato's account isn't really about Atlantis at all, you see. It's about Athens, about showing that ancient Athens, 9,000 years before Solon, was the ideal state, the perfect city, the model of virtue and courage. According to the Egyptian priests, prehistoric Athens was organised according to principles of justice and wisdom. The population was divided into classes, each with its proper role. The warriors lived apart from the other citizens, in a community near the Acropolis. They owned no private property, receiving what they needed from the other citizens. They were the guardians of the state, philosophers and soldiers both, embodying the ideals that Plato describes in his Republic. These ancient Athenians were superior in virtue to all other peoples. They were brave, beautiful, wise. Their city was blessed by the goddess Athena, patroness of wisdom and just warfare. And when the armies of Atlantis threatened the free peoples of the Mediterranean, it was Athens that stood against them. The war was terrible. Atlantis brought its full might to bear, armies and fleets beyond counting. They had already conquered much of the known world. Egypt itself trembled, but Athens, though standing nearly alone, refused to yield. The Athenian warriors marched out to meet the invaders. Battles were fought on land and sea. Ships clashed in narrow straits. Hoplites pushed against hoplites on bloody fields. The courage of the Athenians inspired their allies. Cities that had submitted to Atlantis found the strength to rebel. The tide of war turned, and then, in a single day and night, everything changed. Part 7. The day the world ended. The gods were watching. They had always been watching, and they saw what Atlantis had become. You see, in the beginning, the Atlanteans had been virtuous. The blood of Poseidon flowed in their veins, and they honoured their divine heritage. They valued wisdom over wealth, virtue over luxury. They understood that their blessings carried responsibilities. But over time, over countless generations, the divine portion in their blood grew weaker, diluted by repeated mixing with mortal kind. The human nature predominated, and as it did, the Atlanteans changed. They began to lust after power and possessions. They grew greedy and ambitious. They looked at other lands and saw only resources to exploit, peoples to conquer. The virtues of their ancestors faded, replaced by arrogance and avarice. They became ugly in their souls, though to those who couldn't see clearly, they seemed more magnificent than ever, filled with wealth and power. But the gods could see. Zeus, king of the gods, looked down upon Atlantis and saw how far it had fallen. He saw the injustice, the corruption, the pride that had replaced virtue, and he decided that the Atlanteans must be punished, that through punishment they might learn wisdom once more. Zeus called together all the gods to his most holy dwelling, which stands at the centre of the cosmos and sees all things. And standing before them, he spoke. And here Plato's account ends. The Critias dialogue is incomplete. We never learn what Zeus said, what judgment he pronounced. The text simply stops, leaving us forever wondering what came next. But we know the outcome. We know it from the Timaeus, the other dialogue where Plato mentions Atlantis. We know that earthquakes came, terrible and violent beyond imagination. We know that the earth shook and split. We know that in a single day and night of terrible destruction, Atlantis sank beneath the waves. Picture that last day. Dawn breaks over the island city. The sun rising over the mountains, light touching the orichalcum walls and making them blaze like fire. The people wake and go about their daily lives, unknowing. Merchants open their stalls in the market. Farmers walk out to their fields. Fishermen put to sea. Children play in the streets and gardens. And then, the first tremor. Slight at first, barely noticeable. A rattling of pottery, a swaying that makes people pause and look around. But it passes, and life continues. Then another tremor, stronger this time. Walls crack. Plaster falls from ceilings. People move out into open spaces, afraid to remain in buildings. The animals sense something wrong. Horses scream in their stables. Dogs bark frantically. Birds take wing in massive flocks, circling and calling out in distress. The shaking intensifies. Buildings begin to collapse. The great walls crack and pieces of the brass and tin and orichalcum cladding fall away, crashing into the rings of water below. The bridges that connect the rings begin to break apart. Ships in the harbours smash against docks and against each other. People run, but there is nowhere to run to. The entire island is shaking. The mountains themselves are coming apart. Landslides roar down into the valleys. Trees fall. The carefully maintained roads split and buckle, and then the water begins to rise. The sea, disturbed by the earthquake, by the shifting of the earth beneath it, rises in great waves. Tsunami walls of water racing toward the shore. The first wave crashes over the outer ring, overwhelming the brass-covered wall, flooding the harbours, sweeping ships inland like toys. But this is only the beginning. The shaking grows more violent still. The very foundation of the island is breaking apart. The earth opens in great chasms. Buildings, people, entire sections of the city simply fall into the void. The Temple of Poseidon, that magnificent structure of silver and gold, tilts and then collapses with a sound like the ending of the world. The hot springs that had supplied water to the baths and fountains now burst forth with terrible force, scalding water and steam erupting from the ground. The great canal that surrounded the plain splits and drains, water rushing away into the fractured earth. Night falls, but it is not the normal progression of day into darkness. The sky turns dark from ash and dust thrown up by the catastrophe. Lightning flashes through the darkness, illuminating scenes of devastation. The air itself is hard to breathe, thick with particles and the smell of the torn earth. The people of Atlantis, those who still survive, huddle in whatever shelter they can find. Parents hold children. Strangers clutch each other for comfort. Some pray to the gods, begging for mercy. Others simply weep, watching everything they knew, everything they were, destroyed around them. And still the earth shakes. The island is sinking now, settling into the void beneath it. The water rushes in faster and faster. The outer rings go first, simply disappearing beneath the waves. The great plain, where 2 harvests grew each year, becomes a shallow sea. The mountains begin to collapse, their peaks sliding into the ocean. By dawn, if any survived to see it, there was only water. Atlantis was gone, sunk beneath the Atlantic, vanished as if it had never been. Only debris floating on the surface gave evidence that a civilization had existed there. Broken wood from ships and buildings. Bodies, human and animal both. And mud, vast quantities of mud churned up from the bottom, making the sea impassable for generations to come. The armies of Atlantis, fighting in distant lands, suddenly found themselves without a homeland. Their ships had nowhere to return to. They were stranded, cut off, their families and everything they knew simply erased from existence. And in Athens the victors had little time to celebrate. The same catastrophe that destroyed Atlantis struck the Greek mainland. Athens itself was devastated. The warriors who had saved the free world perished in the disaster. The city was left broken, its glory forgotten. Floods and earthquakes continued for generations, and the memory of what had happened faded into myth and legend. Only in Egypt, protected by the Nile, did the record survive. Only there did priests maintain the knowledge of what had been, waiting for the day when someone would come asking, when the story could be told once more. Your breathing is so slow now, so deep and regular. The story of Atlantis' final day fades like a dream on waking. Let it go. Let yourself sink deeper still. The ancient catastrophe is over. All is quiet now. All is peace. Part 8. The search begins. For centuries after Plato wrote his dialogues, people wondered, was Atlantis real? Was it merely a philosophical allegory, a thought experiment about the rise and fall of civilizations? Or had Plato, through the accounts passed down from Solon and the Egyptian priests, preserved the memory of something that truly happened? Many of Plato's own students believed the story was real. Crantor, one of the earliest commentators on Plato's work, claimed to have seen the Egyptian records that mentioned Atlantis. Other ancient writers, including Plutarch and Strabo, discussed Atlantis as if it might have been a real place, though they debated its location and nature. But as centuries passed, skepticism grew. How could an island larger than Libya and Asia combined simply vanish? How could a civilization so advanced leave no archaeological trace? The story seemed too fantastical, too convenient in its illustration of Plato's philosophical points, and yet people kept searching. The story of Atlantis, whether true or false, had captured something deep in the human imagination. The dream of a lost paradise, a golden age before disaster, a civilization that achieved heights we can barely imagine. It was too compelling to dismiss entirely. Let yourself drift as we move through the centuries of searching. Your conscious mind can rest. The story continues, but you don't need to hold on to every detail. Just let the words wash over you, gentle as waves. In the Middle Ages, scholars debated Atlantis. Some placed it in the Atlantic, as Plato had described. Others suggested it might have been in the Mediterranean, perhaps Crete or Sardinia. Still others thought it might have been in the Americas, which Europeans would not reach for another 1,000 years. When Columbus sailed west and found new lands, some immediately thought of Atlantis. Could these be the islands beyond the Pillars of Heracles? Could the indigenous peoples be descendants of the Atlanteans? The theory was popular for a time, though it raised as many questions as it answered. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Atlantis became associated with various mystical and esoteric traditions. Some claimed to have special knowledge of the lost continent passed down through secret initiations. They described Atlantean magic, Atlantean technology far beyond anything the ancient world should have possessed. Crystal power sources, flying machines, advanced healing techniques. Atlantis became less a historical possibility and more a mythic dreamland, a projection of human hopes and fantasies. The 19th century brought renewed interest from a different angle. Ignatius Donnelly, an American politician and writer, published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World in 1882. Donnelly argued that Atlantis was real and had been the source of all ancient civilizations, Egyptian, Greek, Mayan, Aztec. All, according to Donnelly, were founded by Atlantean survivors who had escaped the catastrophe. His evidence was creative but ultimately unconvincing to scholars. He pointed to similarities between Old World and New World cultures, to flood myths that appear in many traditions, to the presence of advanced ancient structures that seemed beyond the capabilities of their builders. But each of these could be explained without recourse to Atlantis. Parallel development, common human experiences, and underestimation of ancient people's abilities provided simpler explanations. Still, Donnelly's book was wildly popular. It sparked a new wave of Atlantis mania. Dozens of books were published, each claiming to have found the true location of Atlantis or to have uncovered new evidence of its existence. Atlantis moved around the map like a chess piece: the Azores, the Canary Islands, Antarctica. Even the North Sea and the Pacific Ocean were, suggested. Sleep is pulling at you now, steady and irresistible. The search for Atlantis continues in your mind, but it's becoming dreamlike, images blurring together. Let it happen. There's no need to resist. Part 9. The Minoan Connection. In the early 20th century, archaeologists made a discovery that changed how some people thought about Atlantis. Sir Arthur Evans excavated the Palace of Knossos on the island of Crete, revealing the Minoan civilization that had flourished in the Bronze Age. The Minoans were sophisticated, wealthy, and powerful. Their palace at Knossos was enormous, a complex maze of rooms and corridors that gave rise to the legend of the labyrinth. The walls were covered with vivid frescoes showing bull-leaping processions of gift-bearers, dolphins playing in blue seas. The Minoans were traders and sailors, their ships reaching throughout the Mediterranean. They had a writing system still not fully deciphered. They were in many ways the most advanced civilization of their time, and then, around 1500 BCE, Minoan civilization suffered a catastrophic decline. The palaces were destroyed, the writing system was lost. The Minoan culture was eventually absorbed by the Mycenaean Greeks. What had happened? The answer came from another island, 70 miles north of Crete. Thera, now called Santorini, had been a round island with a mountain at its centre. But around 1500 BCE, that mountain exploded in one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. The volcano collapsed into itself, creating a massive caldera where the mountain had been. Tsunamis radiated out from the explosion, racing across the Mediterranean. The island of Thera itself was largely destroyed, buried under volcanic ash and stone, and Crete, being close, suffered terribly from the tsunamis and the ashfall that followed. Could this be the source of the Atlantis story? Some scholars thought so. Here was a real advanced civilization, a real island that suffered a catastrophic disaster, a real event that happened in the Bronze Age, not 9,000 years before Solon, but perhaps 900 years. Could Plato, or his sources, have confused the numbers? Could Egyptian records of the Minoan disaster have been passed down and transformed into the Atlantis story? It's an appealing theory. The Minoan civilization was real and impressive. The Thera eruption was real and devastating. The timeline is at least plausible if we assume errors in transmission, and it would explain why Atlantis left no trace in the Atlantic because it was never there. It was Thera, a real place that exploded and partially sank, leaving the beautiful caldera we can still visit today. But there are problems with this identification. Plato's Atlantis is much larger than Thera. His war between Atlantis and Athens doesn't match any known conflict between the Minoans and Mycenaeans, and Plato explicitly places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, in the Atlantic Ocean, not in the Mediterranean. If he meant Thera, he got almost every geographic detail wrong. Still, the theory persists. It's more comforting, perhaps, to think that Atlantis was based on something real, rather than being pure invention. And the Minoan-Thera connection is at least grounded in archaeological fact, unlike many Atlantis theories. Your mind wanders now through ancient palaces and volcanic explosions, but it's all becoming distant, unimportant. You're so relaxed, so comfortable. Sleep is just a heartbeat away. Part 10. Modern Searches. The search for Atlantis continues even today. Expeditions have explored the Atlantic seabed, looking for unusual formations or evidence of ancient habitation. Satellite imaging has revealed what some claim are geometric structures under the ocean, though these always turn out to be natural formations or artifacts of the imaging process. The Bimini Road, a rock formation off the coast of the Bahamas, was claimed by some to be a remnant of Atlantean construction. Investigation showed it to be natural beach rock, cracked in ways that made it appear artificial. Similar claims have been made for underwater formations near Cuba, Japan, and India. In each case, closer examination has revealed natural origins, or has shown the structures to be much more recent than Atlantis would have been. Atlantis has been placed in virtually every ocean and sea on Earth. Enthusiasts have suggested it was in the Antarctic before that continent froze. They've placed it in the North Sea, claiming the Doggerland region that was flooded at the end of the Ice Age could be Atlantis. They've put it in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea. Wherever there's water and a bit of mystery, someone has claimed to find Atlantis. The problem, of course, is that geological evidence doesn't support any of these claims. There's no evidence of a continent-sized landmass sinking in the Atlantic in historical times. The Atlantic seafloor is well mapped now, and there's nothing there that could be Atlantis. Plate tectonics explains how continents move and change, but these are processes that take millions of years, not the single day and night of Plato's account. If Atlantis existed as described, it should have left evidence: pottery, metal artifacts, ruins on the seabed. The Mediterranean is full of ancient shipwrecks and sunken cities, all easily found once you know where to look. The Atlantic should have similar evidence if a major civilization existed there, especially one as advanced as Atlantis supposedly was. The absence of evidence isn't proof of absence, as the saying goes, but it is at minimum suggestive. After 2,000 years of searching, after countless expeditions and investigations, after all the advances in archaeology and underwater exploration, we have found nothing that convincingly supports the existence of Atlantis. Does this mean Atlantis was definitely fictional? Not necessarily. It means only that if it existed, it wasn't where Plato said it was, or it wasn't as large as he described, or it existed so long ago that all evidence has been lost, or some combination of these factors, or it means that Plato made the whole thing up using it as a dramatic setting for his philosophical points about the ideal state and the dangers of moral corruption. Let go of the question now. It doesn't matter whether Atlantis was real. What matters is the story, the dream it represents, and you are dreaming now, or very nearly so. Your thoughts drift like ships on a calm sea. Nothing troubles you. All is well. Part 11. The meaning of Atlantis. Perhaps the search for the physical Atlantis misses the point. Perhaps what matters isn't whether the place existed, but what the story means, what it tells us about ourselves and our civilizations. Atlantis represents the danger of hubris, of pride that leads to a fall. The Atlanteans had everything: divine heritage, natural resources, military might, wealth beyond measure. But they became corrupt, valuing power over virtue, conquest over justice, and so they were destroyed, not by an enemy but by the gods themselves, punished for their arrogance. It's a warning that has resonated through history. Empires rise and fall, civilizations that seem invincible one day lie in ruins the next. Rome, so mighty it seemed eternal, fell to barbarians. The Mongol Empire, which conquered half the known world, fragmented and disappeared. The British Empire, on which the sun never set, dissolved in the 20th century. No matter how powerful a nation becomes, no matter how advanced its technology, or how vast its wealth, it can fall. Often, the seeds of that fall are planted at the height of success, when victory leads to arrogance, when plenty leads to corruption, when strength makes a people believe they are above the laws that govern others. Atlantis is also a dream of perfection lost. Humanity has always imagined a golden age in the past, a time when things were better, when people were wiser or more virtuous or happier. The Garden of Eden, the age of Kronos, the dream time. Every culture has some version of this myth, some story of how things were once perfect but have since declined. Maybe this reflects our collective memory of childhood, when the world seemed safer and simpler. Maybe it reflects a genuine intuition that modern life, with all its complexity and stress, has cost us something important. Or maybe it's just the human tendency to idealize the past and forget its hardships. Whatever the psychological source, Atlantis has become the ultimate expression of this longing. A civilization that achieved perfection, that had solved all the problems that trouble us, advanced but not soulless, wealthy but not greedy, powerful but just, and all of it lost, sunk beneath the waves, beyond our reach, but not beyond our memory. There's something comforting about this story. It suggests that perfection is possible, that humanity has achieved it before and might achieve it again. It gives us something to aspire to, a vision of what we might become if we can just avoid the moral failings that destroyed the Atlanteans. And there's something melancholic about it too. The knowledge that even perfection is temporary, that everything we build will eventually fall, that even if we achieve the society of our dreams, it won't last forever. Time and change and the imperfections of human nature will inevitably bring it down. You understand this now in the drowsy wisdom that comes just before sleep. Nothing lasts, everything changes, and yet the stories persist, passed down through generations, kept alive by those who find meaning in them. Atlantis may be gone, if it ever existed, but the idea of Atlantis lives on. Your breathing is barely perceptible now, so slow and shallow. Your body has completely relaxed. You're floating in that space between waking and sleeping, aware of my words but not quite processing them. That's perfect. That's exactly where you should be. Part 12. Atlantis in popular culture. The story of Atlantis has captured the popular imagination in ways that few ancient legends have. It appears in novels, films, comics, and games. It has been reimagined countless times, each version reflecting the concerns and dreams of its era. Jules Verne sent Captain Nemo and Professor Aronnax to the ruins of Atlantis in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. They walked among sunken columns and broken statues, seeing the remnants of a once great civilization. Verne's Atlantis was real, clearly based on ancient Greece, destroyed by some catastrophe, and now serving as a museum of vanished glory. In the early 20th century, pulp magazines featured Atlantis regularly. It became a setting for adventure stories, a place where lost princesses needed rescuing and ancient treasures waited to be found. These stories cared little for Plato's account. Their Atlantis had magic and monsters, heroes with swords, villains with dark powers. It was a fantasy realm more than a historical speculation. The comic character Aquaman, created in the 1940s, made Atlantis his home. In this version, the kingdom hadn't been destroyed but had survived underwater, populated by people who had adapted to aquatic life. Atlantis became a recurring setting in DC Comics, a hidden civilization with advanced technology and sometimes hostile relations with the surface world. The Disney animated film Atlantis: The Lost Empire presented the city as a pocket of ancient culture, surviving beneath the ocean, its people slowly dying because they'd forgotten how to use their power source. It was a beautiful film, full of Art Nouveau designs and adventure, though it played loose with Plato's description. In the Stargate franchise, Atlantis was a city built by advanced aliens called the Ancients. It could fly through space and travel between galaxies. This was Atlantis as science fiction, ancient astronaut theory mixed with military adventure. The connection to Plato's original story was tenuous at best, but the name and the basic concept of a lost advanced civilization remained. These adaptations and reimaginings show how flexible the Atlantis story is. It can be historical fiction or pure fantasy. It can be a warning about hubris or an exciting adventure setting. It can represent our past or our future. The core idea, a great civilization now lost, is simple enough to adapt to almost any genre or medium. And people continue to be fascinated. New books about Atlantis appear every year. Documentaries investigate various theories about its location. Video games let you explore it or rebuild it. The market for Atlantis content never seems to dry up. Why? Perhaps because Atlantis offers escape. It's a door to another world, one more interesting than our own. Perhaps because it offers mystery. Despite all our scientific advances, here's something we can't explain, can't find, can't know for certain. Perhaps because it offers hope. If humans built something so magnificent once, maybe we can do it again. Or perhaps simply because it's a good story, and humans need stories the way they need food and water. We are storytelling creatures. We make sense of our lives through narrative, and Atlantis is one of the great narratives, rich enough to support endless variations, ambiguous enough to mean different things to different people. Sleep is here now, pressing close. The story of Atlantis in popular culture continues, but you don't need to hear more. You've heard enough. Let yourself go. Let sleep take you. Part 13. The philosophy behind the legend. We should return, before you sleep completely, to Plato's purpose in telling the story. Because he wasn't writing history or adventure fiction. He was doing philosophy, using narrative to explore ideas about justice, government, and human nature. In the Republic, Plato describes his ideal state, a society divided into three classes: the producers who make things, the auxiliaries who enforce laws and defend the state, and the guardians who rule with wisdom. Each class has its proper role. Each person has their place according to their nature and abilities. Justice consists in each person doing their proper work, not interfering with others' roles. The guardians, Plato argues, should be philosophers. They should have no private property, no families of their own in the usual sense. They should be trained from childhood in both physical and mental discipline. They should love wisdom more than wealth or power. Only such people, he believes, should be allowed to rule. This ideal state, Plato admits, may never exist. It may be too good for imperfect humans, but it serves as a model, something to aim for, a way of judging how close or far actual states come to justice. Ancient Athens in the Atlantis story is meant to be this ideal state, or close to it. The warriors live, apart, own no property, receive their needs from the other citizens. They defend the state against external threats. They embody the virtues Plato admires, and when tested by the threat from Atlantis, they prove themselves worthy, fighting for freedom and justice against imperial aggression. Atlantis, on the other hand, represents what happens when a state goes wrong. The Atlanteans start with every advantage: divine heritage, abundant resources, strong institutions. But over time, they become corrupted. They value the wrong things. They pursue conquest and wealth instead of virtue and wisdom. They become unjust, and so they are destroyed, not by Athens alone, though Athens defeats them in war, but by the gods, by Zeus himself, who punishes them for their moral failings. The physical destruction of Atlantis mirrors its moral destruction. The sinking of the island beneath the waves is the outward sign of an inner corruption that had already hollowed out the civilization. Plato is warning his fellow Athenians. Athens in his day was struggling, recovering from defeat in the Peloponnesian War, its democracy often seeming chaotic and unjust. Plato wanted Athenians to remember, or in this case, imagine, a better version of their city, and he wanted them to see what could happen if they followed the path of imperial ambition and moral decline. The message is timeless. It applies to any civilization, any era. Success brings temptations. Wealth and power can corrupt. The values that build a great society are not the same as the values that maintain it. Without constant attention to justice and virtue, even the most successful civilization will eventually fall. Whether Plato believed his own story about Atlantis is unclear. Some scholars think he presented it as history to give it more weight, to make the warning more vivid. Others think he might have believed that something like Atlantis really existed, even if the details were uncertain. But in the end, it doesn't matter. The story works whether it's history or fiction. The philosophical points remain valid, and the image of Atlantis, the golden civilization brought low by its own failings, has proven powerful enough to last more than 2,000 years. You're at the very edge of sleep now. The philosophy blurs into dream. Ideas become images. Arguments become feelings. Let it all go. Plato can take care of himself. The ideal state can wait. You have earned your rest. Part 14. Other Lost Civilizations. Atlantis is not alone. Human cultures around the world have stories of lost lands, vanished peoples, golden ages that ended in catastrophe. These stories speak to something deep in our nature. Some need to imagine that there was more to the past than we know, that wonders have been lost and might someday be found again. In Tamil literature there are references to Kumari Kandam, a continent that supposedly existed south of India but was swallowed by the sea. According to legend, it was a cradle of civilization, home to the first Tamil kingdoms. As the sea rose, the people fled north, bringing their culture to the Indian subcontinent. Some enthusiasts have tried to connect this to Lemuria, a hypothetical continent proposed by 19th century scientists to explain the distribution of lemurs before plate tectonics was understood. But like Atlantis, there's no geological evidence for such a continent in historical times. In Japanese legend, there is Rugujo, the palace of the dragon god beneath the sea. It's described as a place of incredible beauty and magic, where time passes differently than in the mortal world. Fishermen who visit it return to find that years or centuries have passed. This is more clearly mythological than Atlantis, but it shares the theme of a wondrous realm beneath the waves. Celtic mythology speaks of High Brazil, an island to the west of Ireland that appears only once every 7 years. It's supposed to be a land of plenty where advanced people live in harmony. Some maps of the Atlantic actually showed High Brazil for centuries, placing it near where Atlantis might have been. Of course, no such island has ever been found. Avalon, the island where King Arthur was taken after his final battle, is another version of this archetype. A mystical isle, sometimes visible but usually hidden, where ancient magic survives and wounded heroes can heal. It may return someday, bringing Arthur back when Britain needs him most. These stories share common elements. A place of beauty and abundance, people who are wiser or more advanced than us, a separation from the ordinary world by water or mist or magic, and usually a catastrophe or loss that removed the place from easy access. Sometimes there's a promise of return, of rediscovery, of reconnection with what was lost. Psychologically, these stories may serve several functions. They give us heroes and ancestors to be proud of, even if we can't quite reach them. They suggest that humanity has achieved great things and might do so again. They provide a counterbalance to the hardships of present life. Somewhere, somehow, things were better. And they offer hope that the lost wisdom or magic or goodness might be found again, if we search hard enough or become worthy enough. But there's also something melancholy about these legends. They're always about something gone, something we can't quite reach. Paradise is behind us, not ahead. The Golden Age is over. The best we can hope for is to rediscover fragments of what was lost. Modern lost civilization stories often have a different flavour. We imagine finding remnants of alien visitors, ancient astronauts who came to Earth and left behind monuments we misinterpret as primitive human work. Or we imagine secret societies that preserved ancient knowledge, waiting for the right time to reveal it. These stories feed on the same desire to believe that there's more to history than the official accounts tell us, but they dress it up in science. Fiction rather than pure myth, and yet the core appeal is the same. We want there to be mysteries left in the world. We want the past to be more interesting than we know. We want to believe that humanity, or someone, something, achieved marvels that have been forgotten. Atlantis is the king of these stories, the most famous, the most enduring. But it's part of a family of legends, all expressing similar hopes and fears, all speaking to the same deep human needs. Let these lost lands drift through your mind now. Continents beneath the waves, islands in the mist, kingdoms of legend. They're all fading now, becoming softer, less distinct. You're fading too, into sleep, into dreams of your own. That's good. That's right. Let go. Part 15. The Science of Lost Lands. Could a civilization like Atlantis have existed and then vanished without leaving evidence? It's worth considering what science tells us about lost lands and sunken cities. We know that sea levels have changed dramatically over human history. During the last ice age, which ended about 12,000 years ago, sea levels were several hundred feet lower than today. Vast areas that are now underwater were dry land. The English Channel was a valley. You could walk from Asia to North America across the Bering Strait. The coastlines of every continent extended much farther out than they do now. As the ice melted, sea levels rose. This happened relatively quickly in geological terms, though still over thousands of years. Coastal areas were flooded, islands disappeared, and if humans were living in these areas, and we know they were, their settlements would have been lost to the rising waters. Doggerland, for instance, was a region in what is now the North Sea, connecting Britain to continental Europe. It was inhabited during the Mesolithic period. As sea levels rose, it gradually flooded, until by about 6,000 years ago it was completely submerged. We've recovered artifacts from this area through fishing and dredging, proving that people lived there, but it wasn't a highly advanced civilization. It was Stone Age hunter-gatherers, people living in small bands leaving behind tools of flint and bone. Similarly, underwater archaeology has discovered settlements off the coasts of many countries. Pavlopetri in Greece, submerged for over 4,000 years. Dwarka off the coast of India, claimed by some to be the legendary city of Lord Krishna. Heraklion in Egypt, a major port city that sank due to soil liquefaction and now sits on the Mediterranean seafloor. These discoveries show that cities can indeed be submerged. Coastlines change. What was once dry land becomes ocean. Earthquakes and soil conditions can cause settlements to sink. So in principle, Atlantis could have suffered such a fate. But there are important differences. First, all the sunken cities we've found left extensive archaeological evidence. Buildings, pottery, metal objects, all the detritus of human civilization. They're not hard to locate once you know where to look. If Atlantis existed in the Atlantic and was as large and advanced as Plato describes, we should be able to find it. The Atlantic seafloor is well mapped now, including with sonar and other technologies. There's simply nothing there that matches the description. Second, the timescale matters. Plato places Atlantis' destruction 9,000 years before Solon, which would be around 9,500 BCE. That's toward the end of the Ice Age, when sea levels were rising. But humans at that time were not building vast cities with walls of brass and orichalcum. They were hunter-gatherers. Agriculture hadn't been invented yet. Writing was thousands of years in the future. The technologies needed to create Plato's Atlantis simply didn't exist. If we accept that Plato or his sources got the date wrong, and place Atlantis in the Bronze Age instead, the timeline becomes more plausible. We know that Bronze Age civilizations were sophisticated. They had writing, metals, complex architecture, trade networks. The Minoans certainly fit this profile, but then we're back to the question of location. Thera is in the Mediterranean, not the Atlantic. And while the eruption there was catastrophic, the island didn't entirely disappear. Some have suggested that Atlantis might have been in the Americas, which would technically be beyond the Pillars of Heracles from a Mediterranean perspective. But again, we have no evidence of a Bronze Age civilization in the Americas matching Plato's description. The great civilizations of pre-Columbian America, the Olmec, the Maya, the Aztec, the Inca, all came later, and while impressive, they don't match the specific details Plato gives for Atlantis. The scientific consensus, then, is that Atlantis as Plato describes it almost certainly didn't exist. The geological evidence doesn't support it. The archaeological evidence doesn't support it. The technological timeline doesn't support it. It's possible that the story is based on some real event, a flood, a volcanic eruption, a civilization's collapse. But if so, the details have been so changed and exaggerated that the original source is unrecognizable. This doesn't diminish the story's value as literature or philosophy, but it does mean that searching for the physical Atlantis is probably futile. The lost continent isn't out there waiting to be discovered. It exists only in the realm of imagination and myth. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's even preferable. A real Atlantis would inevitably disappoint, would fail to live up to the legend. The imaginary Atlantis can be whatever we need it to be, can mean whatever we want it to mean. It can remain perfect because it remains out of reach. Your thoughts are fragmenting now, breaking apart like waves on a shore. Science and myth blend together. Facts become feelings. Everything is becoming indistinct, blurry, soft. This is good. This is the way. Let yourself dissolve into sleep. Part 16. Atlantis and the question of progress. One reason Atlantis fascinates us is that it challenges our assumptions about progress. We tend to think of history as linear, as a progression from primitive to advanced, from ignorance to knowledge, from weakness to power. We imagine our ancestors as less capable than us, less intelligent, less sophisticated. But what if that's wrong? What if there have been rises and falls, cycles of civilization? What if humanity reached great heights in the distant past only to fall and have to climb again? This is an unsettling idea. It suggests that our own civilization, as advanced as it seems, might be temporary. It suggests that progress isn't guaranteed, that we could lose everything we've built. It makes our achievements seem more fragile, less secure. And yet, it also offers a strange kind of comfort. If civilizations have fallen before and humanity survived, then perhaps we can survive whatever catastrophes might come. If ancient peoples achieved great things, then perhaps we underestimate human potential. Maybe we're not as special as we think, but maybe we're more resilient. Atlantis in Plato's telling was more advanced than Athens in his day. Its engineers built marvels, its ships controlled the seas, its armies were powerful, and yet it fell, while Athens, though also damaged, survived, and eventually rose again. Technological advancement didn't save the Atlanteans. Their superior power couldn't protect them from divine judgment. There's a warning here about putting too much faith in technology, in material progress. Plato suggests that moral and spiritual qualities matter more than physical capabilities. A just society with limited resources is stronger than a corrupt empire with vast wealth. Virtue is more important than power. This is countercultural in both Plato's time and ours. We tend to assume that technological progress is good, that more advanced means better. But Plato questions this. He suggests that the relationship between technological capability and human flourishing is not straightforward. An advanced civilization can be unjust. A simple society can be virtuous. The Industrial Revolution and the centuries since have only intensified our faith in progress. We've achieved things that would seem like magic to our ancestors. We've eradicated diseases, extended lifespans, connected the entire world through communications networks. We've split the atom and visited the moon. Surely this is progress. And yet we've also created new problems. Environmental degradation, nuclear weapons, social atomization, mental health crises. The same technologies that give us power also give us new vulnerabilities. The more complex our systems become, the more ways they can fail. Atlantis reminds us that collapse is possible, that civilizations don't inevitably progress onward and upward, that even the mightiest can fall. This is a truth that every age needs to remember, but that every age tends to forget in its moment of triumph. Rome at its height couldn't imagine falling to barbarians. The British Empire at its zenith couldn't conceive of dissolution. And we, in our technological glory, find it hard to imagine a future where our civilization has crumbled and our achievements are forgotten. But it could happen. Climate change, nuclear war, pandemic, ecological collapse, artificial intelligence run amok. We face threats that could, in principle, bring down our civilization. Maybe not in a single day and night like Atlantis, but over decades or centuries, which is the same thing to future historians. Or maybe we'll survive. Maybe we'll learn from our mistakes, balance our technological power with wisdom, achieve something stable and just. Maybe we'll prove better than the Atlanteans, better than the Romans, better than all the fallen civilizations of history. Plato couldn't answer this question for his own time, and we can't answer it for ours. We can only do our best, stay vigilant, and hope that virtue and wisdom will guide us through whatever challenges come. But these are heavy thoughts, too heavy for sleep. Let them go now. The fall of civilizations, the question of progress, the uncertain future, all of it can wait. You need rest. You deserve rest. Let the weight of history slide away. Float free. Sleep. Part 17. Dreams of Atlantis. What would it be like to actually visit Atlantis at its height? Not the ruined, sunken Atlantis of imagination, but the living city, full of people going about their lives. You would arrive by ship, probably. Approaching from the sea, you'd first see the mountains of the island rising from the horizon. Then, as you drew closer, the details would emerge. The outer wall with its brass covering gleaming in the sunlight, ships moving in and out of the harbour, gulls wheeling overhead. Your ship would enter through the great canal passing under one of the covered bridges. The harbour would be busy, full of vessels from all over the world. You'd hear a dozen languages, smell spices and tar and fish. Longshoremen would be loading and unloading cargo. Merchants would be arguing about prices. Everything would be in motion, alive with commerce and purpose. Disembarking, you'd make your way through the outer ring. The city here would be dense, buildings packed close together. The streets would be narrow, shaded, smelling of cooking food and human habitation. Shops would line the ground floors, everything available for purchase. Fish and bread and wine, cloth and leather and pottery, jewellery and tools and toys for children. The people would be diverse. Native Atlanteans, easily identified by their dress and bearing, but also foreigners from all over. Egyptian merchants in white linen, Greek traders arguing philosophy, pale-skinned northerners selling furs and amber, dark-skinned southerners with ivory and gold. Atlantis would be cosmopolitan, a meeting place of cultures. Crossing another bridge, you'd move to the inner ring. Here the buildings would be larger, more impressive. The homes of wealthy merchants, successful craftsmen, minor nobility. The streets would be wider, cleaner. Gardens would be more common. Fountains would splash in public squares, fed by the hot and cold springs that blessed the island. Children would play in these squares, their laughter echoing off stone walls. Old men would gather to gossip and debate. Women would draw water from the fountains, chatting as they waited their turn. Normal human activities, the universal routines of urban life. As you moved inward, the wealth would increase. The innermost ring of land would house the true aristocracy, the high officials, the ancient families. Their homes would be mansions surrounded by walls and gardens. You'd glimpse private baths through open gates, hear music from inner courtyards. Guards would stand at doorways, polite but watchful. And finally, crossing the last bridge, you'd reach the Acropolis, the sacred centre. Here everything would be on a larger scale. The palace of the king would dominate one section, a complex of buildings housing the royal family and all their attendants. Government buildings would occupy another area where the business of empire was conducted. But the Temple of Poseidon would draw your eye and hold it. So large, so ornate, so obviously the work of centuries and the focus of incredible wealth. You'd join the queue of worshippers and tourists, waiting for your chance to enter. Inside, the ceiling would disappear into shadows above. The statue of the god would tower over you, gold catching whatever light filtered in. The smell would be incense and old stone. Your footsteps would echo. You'd feel small, insignificant, aware of being in the presence of something beyond human scale. Outside again, you'd wander the sacred precinct. The groves would offer shade and quiet. The springs would provide water for ritual washing. Statues would stand everywhere, frozen in poses of reverence or triumph. The past would press in on you, all the generations that had worshipped here, all the prayers that had been offered. As evening came, you'd find yourself at one of the public baths. The water would be perfectly warm, heated by the earth itself. You'd soak away the day's exertions, talking with other bathers, sharing news and stories. Through the windows you'd see the city beginning to glow with lamplight, thousands of flames marking streets and buildings. Later you'd dine in one of the many taverns, fish fresh from the sea, prepared with herbs and oil, bread still warm from the oven, wine mixed with water in the Greek fashion. Around you, conversation would flow in multiple languages. Sailors would tell tall tales, merchants would complain about taxes, philosophers would debate the nature of justice, and finally, returning to whatever lodging you'd found, you'd lie down to sleep in Atlantis. Outside your window you'd hear the city settling into night. Dogs barking, distant voices, the sound of water lapping against stone. You'd drift off thinking about tomorrow, about what you'd explore, who you'd meet, what wonders you'd see, never knowing that doom was approaching, never suspecting that this city, seemingly eternal, had only days or hours left. never imagining that soon all this would be gone, sunk beneath the waves, lost to memory except as a legend that nobody quite believed. But you're not in Atlantis. You're here, safe, comfortable, on the edge of sleep. The dream of Atlantis fades. Your own dreams wait to take its place. Let them come. The ancient city has told its story. Now you can rest. Part 18. The Persistence of Mystery. Why does Atlantis endure when so many other legends have faded? Why do we still care about this story that Plato told over 2,000 years ago? Perhaps because it speaks to something fundamental in human nature. We are curious creatures. We want to know what we don't know, to discover what's hidden, to understand mysteries, and Atlantis is the ultimate mystery. A civilization that might have existed, a catastrophe that might have happened, evidence that might be out there waiting to be found. It's tantalizing precisely because it's unresolved. If we definitively proved Atlantis never existed, the story would lose much of its appeal. If we found conclusive ruins, that might actually be worse. The reality would probably disappoint compared to the legend. The sweet spot is uncertainty, possibility, the chance that somewhere out there lies the answer. This is why people keep searching. This is why new books and documentaries appear every year. This is why expeditions continue to explore the seafloor. Not because there's any real likelihood of finding Atlantis, but because the search itself is meaningful. It represents humanity's refusal to accept that all mysteries can be solved, all questions answered. It represents our hope that there's more to discover, more to learn, more wonders waiting. And on a deeper level, Atlantis represents our relationship with the past. We want to believe that our ancestors were capable of greatness. We want to think that human potential has always been high, that given the right circumstances, people in any era could achieve remarkable things. Atlantis says, yes they could, they did. They built something amazing. Even if it's fiction, even if Plato made it all up, the story affirms something important. It says that human civilization is capable of creating beauty and wonder. It says that we have the capacity for greatness, even if we also have the capacity for self-destruction. The story also gives us permission to imagine. If we can imagine Atlantis, we can imagine other possibilities, better societies, alternative histories, futures different from the one we seem headed toward. The act of imagining Atlantis is practice for imagining everything else we might want to create, or discover, or become. And finally, Atlantis gives us a common reference point, a shared myth that spans cultures and eras. Almost everyone knows the basic story. It appears in art and literature worldwide. It's part of our collective cultural inheritance, like the tales of Troy or King Arthur or the adventures of Odysseus. These shared stories matter. They give us common ground, a way to communicate across differences. They provide frameworks for thinking about complex issues. They offer lessons that can be applied to new situations. They connect us to the past and to each other. So Atlantis persists not because it's true, but because it's useful, because it's beautiful, because it makes us think and wonder and dream, because it's a story worth telling, worth hearing, worth passing on to the next generation. And like all the best stories, it works its magic on us even as we drift into sleep. Even as conscious thought gives way to dreams, the images linger, the ideas burrow deep. And somewhere in your sleeping mind, Atlantis still exists, golden and perfect, waiting beneath the waves. Your breathing is so deep now, so slow, you're barely awake. The boundary between sleep and waking has dissolved. You exist in that twilight realm where anything seems possible, where ancient cities might surface from dreams. Part 19. The Eternal Return. There's one more thing to consider about Atlantis, one more reason it matters. The idea that it might return, that what was lost might be found again, that the Golden Age might come back around. Many versions of the Atlantis legend include this element. The continent will rise again, the survivors will emerge from hiding, the advanced technology will be rediscovered. Atlantis is not permanently gone but merely sleeping, waiting for the right moment. This is a powerful idea. It transforms Atlantis from a tragedy into a promise. Yes, greatness was lost, but it will return. Yes, we fell, but we can rise again. The cycle continues. What has been, will be again. This connects to older, deeper myths about time. Many ancient cultures saw time as cyclical rather than linear. The seasons repeat. Generations follow the same patterns. Civilizations rise and fall and rise again. The end is also a beginning. The Greek idea of the Great Year, a cosmic cycle after which everything returns to its starting point and begins again. The Hindu concept of yugas, vast ages of time that cycle through golden ages and dark ages. The Norse idea of Ragnarok, a catastrophic end that nevertheless leads to a new beginning and a new world. Atlantis fits into this pattern. It represents one turn of the Great Wheel, a golden age that fell into darkness, but the wheel keeps turning. The darkness won't last forever. Somewhere ahead, perhaps soon, perhaps in ages to come, the golden age will return. This is comforting. It means that nothing is permanent, neither evil nor suffering. It means that failure is not final. It means that humanity gets another chance, and another as many as we need to finally get it right. It also means that we are not alone in our struggles. Our ancestors faced challenges and sometimes failed. Their civilizations fell, but they tried again, they built again. And here we are, their descendants, still trying, still building, still reaching for something better. Maybe we'll achieve it. Maybe we'll create a society that's truly just, truly wise, truly sustainable. Maybe we'll become the new Atlantis, the civilization that future ages look back on with wonder. Or maybe we'll fail, as the Atlanteans failed. Maybe our hubris will bring us down. Maybe we'll be the cautionary tale that some future philosopher tells to warn their own civilization. Either way, the cycle continues, humanity endures, the quest for a better world goes on. And the dream of Atlantis, the vision of what we might achieve if we're wise and lucky and virtuous enough, remains to inspire us. This is the final gift of the Atlantis story. Not just a tale of the past, but a vision of possibility. Not just loss, but potential. Not just a warning about hubris, but also an affirmation of human capability. We built it once, the story whispers. We can build it again. Not the same way, not in the same place, but something equally magnificent. Something that honours the best of what came before, while avoiding the mistakes that led to destruction. And maybe, just maybe, this time we'll get it right. This time we'll achieve the golden age and make it last. This time we'll be the civilization that doesn't fall, that learns wisdom before catastrophe teaches it. Or maybe not. Maybe we're doomed to repeat the cycle. Maybe Atlantis will always be lost, will always be rediscovered in dreams and legends, but never in waking reality. But that's a question for another day, for another telling. Right now the story is ending. The ancient city fades into dream. The waves close over it. The mystery remains. And you, dear listener, you are almost completely asleep now. The words have done their work. Your mind is quiet. Your body is at rest. Dreams are gathering, preparing to take you to whatever lands your sleeping self wishes to explore. Maybe you'll dream of Atlantis. Maybe you'll walk its streets, see its wonders, witness its fall. Maybe you'll be there in that final moment, as the earth shakes and the waters rise. Or maybe you'll dream of something else entirely. Your own mysteries, your own lost cities, your own golden ages waiting to be built or remembered. Either way, sleep well, rest deeply. Let the night restore you. Tomorrow is far away. The present moment is all peace and comfort. There is nothing to worry about, nothing to fear. You are safe. You are home. You are drifting into the best sleep you've had in a long time. Closing. The story of Atlantis has been told. The world that fell in a single day has risen and fallen again in your imagination. All the questions remain unanswered, all the mysteries unsolved, but that's as it should be. Some stories aren't meant to be resolved. Some mysteries are meant to endure. Let Atlantis rest beneath the waves of your subconscious now. Let it settle into the deep places of your mind where myths and dreams live. It will still be there when you wake, if you want it to be. The legend doesn't fade. It only sleeps, like you're sleeping now, so deeply asleep, so completely at rest, floating in darkness as Atlantis floats in the ocean depths, lost and found and lost again, dreaming and dreamed, a story that tells itself in the space between waking and sleep. Good night, sleepless survivor. May your dreams be as golden as the age of Atlantis. May your rest be as deep as the ocean that covers it. May you wake refreshed, carrying with you only the vaguest memory of where we've been tonight, what wonders we've seen, what mysteries we've touched. Atlantis has fallen, Atlantis endures, the story is told and the story continues, and you, finally, blessedly, are asleep. This is Sleepless Survivors. Thank you for listening. Sleep well.